Hunt couldn't take his eyes from the feet of Bryce battling her way through the city. Hypaxia's phone rang somewhere off to his left, and the Witch Queen answered before the first ring had ended. Listened. What do you mean the brooms are destroyed? Declan patched her call through to the speakers, so they could all hear the shaking voice of the witch on the other end of the line. They're all in splinters, Your Majesty. The conference center armory too. The guns, the swords, the helicopters too. The cars, all of it, wrecked. Dread curled in Hunt's gut as the Autumn King murmured, Micah. The Archangel must have done it before he left, quietly and unseen, anticipating, keeping them at bay while he experimented with the horn's power, with Bryce. I have a helicopter, Fury said. I keep it off sight. Rune got to his feet. Then we move now. It would still take 30 minutes to get there. The city's a slaughterhouse, Sabine was saying into the phone. Hold your post and move Wood and Firo. Every pack in the aux was linked to the call, able to hear each other. With a few keystrokes, Declan had linked Sabine's phone to the system in the conference room so the aux could hear them all as well. But some packs had stopped responding altogether. Hunt snapped at Sabine. Get a fucking wolf pack to the old square now. Even with Fury's helicopter, he'd be too late. But if help could at least reach Bryce before she headed solo into the charnel house, that would be the Meadows. Sabine snapped back at him. There are no wolves left for the old square. But the prime of the wolves had stirred at last, and pointed an ancient gnarled finger to the screen, to the feeds, and said, One wolf remains in the old square. Everyone looked then, to where he pointed, whom he'd pointed to. Bryce raced through the carnage, sword glinting with each swipe, and duck, and slash. Sabine choked. That's Danica's sword you're sensing, father. The Prime's age-worn eyes blinked unseeingly at the screen. His hand curled on his chest. A wolf. He tapped his heart. Still Bryce fought onward toward the Meadows. She still ran interference for anyone fleeing for the shelters, buying them a path to safety. A true wolf. Hunt's throat tightened to the point of pain. He extended his hand to Isaiah. Give me your phone. Isaiah didn't question him, and didn't say a word as he handed it over. Hunt dialed the number he'd memorized, since he hadn't dared to store it in his contacts. The call rang, and rang before it finally went through. I'm guessing this is important? Hunt didn't bother to identify himself as he growled. You owe me a goddamn favor. The Viper Queen only said, amusement coating her rich voice. Oh? 2 minutes later, Hunt had risen from his seat, intent on following Rune to Fury's helicopter, when Jezebel's phone rang. The sorceress announced, voice straining, It's Bryce. Hunt whipped his head to the camera feed, and sure enough, Bryce had tucked her phone into her bra strap over her shoulder, presumably leaving it on speaker. She wove around abandoned cars as she crossed the border into Asphodel Meadows. The sun began to set, as if Solus himself was abandoning them. Bring it up on the speakers, and merge the call with the aux lines, Jezebel ordered Declan. And answer the phone. Bryce? Bryce's panting was labored. Her rifle cracked like breaking thunder. Tell whoever's at the summit that I need backup in the Meadows. I'm heading for the shelter near the Mortal Gate. Rune vaulted down the stairs and ran right to the speaker in the center of the table. He said to it, Bryce, it's a massacre. Get inside that shelter before they all shut. Her rifle boomed, and another demon went down. But more swept through the gates and into the city, staining the streets with blood as surely as the vibrant sunset now stained the sky. Bryce ducked behind a dumpster for cover as she fired again and again, reloaded. There's no backup for Asphodel Meadows, Sabine said. Every pack is stationed. There are children here, Bryce screamed. There are babies. The room fell silent. A deeper sort of horror spread through Hunt like ink and water. And then a male voice panted over the speakers. "I'm coming, Bryce." Bryce's bloodied face crumpled as she whispered, "Ethan?" Sabine snarled, "Holstrom, stay at your fucking post." But Ethan said again, more urgently this time, "Bryce, I'm coming. Hang on." A pause. Then he added, "We're all coming." Hunt's knees wobbled at Sabine as Sabine bellowed at Ethan. "You're disobeying a direct order from your..." Ethan cut off her call, and every wolf under his command ended their connection too. The wolves could be at the meadows in 3 minutes. 3 minutes through hell, through the slaughter and death. 3 minutes in a flat-out run, a sprint to save the most defenseless among them, the human children. The jackals joined them, the coyotes, the wild dogs and common dogs, the hyenas and dingoes, the foxes. It was who they were, who they had always been. Defenders of those who could not protect themselves. Defenders of the small, the young. Shifter or true animal, the truth lay etched in the soul of every canine. Ethan Holstrom sprinted toward the Asphodel Meadows, with the weight of that history behind him, burning in his heart. He prayed he was not too late. Bryce knew it was stupid luck that kept her alive, and pure adrenaline that made her focus her aim so clearly, calmly. But with each block she cleared as the sunset deepened, her legs moved more slowly. Her reactions lagged. Her arms ached, becoming laden. Every pull of the trigger took a bit more effort, just a little longer. That was all she needed. Just a little longer until she could make sure that everyone in Asphodel Meadows got into a shelter before they all closed. It wouldn't be long now. The shelter halfway down the block remained opened. Figures holding the line in front of it while human families rushed in. The mortal gate lay a few blocks northward, still open to hell. So Bryce planted herself at the intersection, sheathing Danica's sword as she raised again Hunt's rifle to her shoulder. She had 6 rounds left. Ethan would be here soon, any moment now. A demon surged from around a corner, taloned fingers gouging lines into the cobblestones. The rifle bit into her shoulder as she fired. The demon was still falling, sliding across the ground. When she angled the rifle and fired again, another demon went down. 4 bullets left. Behind her, humans screamed orders. "Hurry, into the shelter. Drop the bag and run." Bryce fired at a demon soaring across the intersection, right for the shelter. The demon went down 20 feet from the entrance. The humans finished it off. Inside the shelter's open mouth, children shrieked, babies wailed. Bryce fired again, again, again. Another demon barreled around the corner, sprinting for her. The trigger clicked. Out. Done. Empty. The demon leapt, jaws open wide, to reveal twin rows of dagger-sharp teeth, aiming for her. Bryce barely had time to lift the rifle and wedge it between those gaping jaws. Metal and wood groaned, and the world tilted with the impact. She and the demon slammed into the cobblestones, her bones barking in pain. The demon clamped down on the rifle. It snapped in two. Bryce managed to hurl herself backward from under the demon as it spat out the pieces of the rifle. Maul leaking saliva on the bloody streets. It advanced on her, seemed to savor each step. With her sheathed sword pinned beneath her, Bryce reached for the knife at her thigh, as if it would do anything, as if it would stop this. The demon sank into its haunches, readying for the kill. The ground shook behind her as Bryce angled her wrist, blade tilting upward. The sword plunged through the demon's gray head, a massive sword, at least 4 feet long, borne by a towering, armored male figure. Blue lights glowed along the blade. More glared along the sleek black body armor and a matching helmet. And across the male's chest, an emblem of a striking cobra glowed. One of the Viper Queen's Fey bodyguards. 6 others raced past him, the cobblestones shaking beneath their feet, guns and swords drawn. No venom-addled stupor to be seen, just lethal precision. And with the Viper Queen's Fae guards, wolves and foxes and canines of every breed followed by, launching into the fray. Bryce scrambled to her feet, nodding to the warrior who saved her. The Fae male only whirled, his metal-encased hands grabbing a demon by the shoulders and wrenching it apart with a mighty yell. He tore the demon in two. But more of Hell's worst thundered and soared for them. So Bryce freed Danica's sword again from across her back. She willed strength to her arm, bracing her feet as another demon galloped down the street for her. Canine shifters engaged demons all around, forming a barrier of fur and teeth and claws between the oncoming horde and the shelter behind them. Bryce feigned left, swiping her sword up as the demon fell for her fake-out. But the blade didn't break through the bone, into the soft, vulnerable organs beneath. The creature roared, pivoting and lunged again. She gritted her teeth and lifted her sword in challenge. The demon, too frenzied to notice that she let herself become the distraction, while the massive grey wolf attacked from behind. Ethan ripped into the demon in an explosion of teeth and claws, so fast and brutal it momentarily stunned her. She'd forgotten how enormous he was in this form. All the shifters were at least 3 times the size of normal animals, but Ethan had always been larger, exactly like his brother. Ethan spat out the demon's throat and shifted, Wolf becoming a tall male in a flash of light. Blood coated his navy t-shirt and jeans as much as it did her own clothes. But before they could speak, his brown eyes flared with alarm. Bryce twisted, met by the rancid breath of a demon as it dive-bombed her. She ducked and thrust the sword upward, the demon's shriek nearly bursting her ears as she let the beast drag its belly down the blade, gutting it. Gore splattered her sneakers, her torn leggings, but she made sure the demon's head was rolling before whirling to Ethan, just as he drew his sword from a sheath on his back and split another demon apart. Their stares held, and all the words she needed to say hung there. She saw them in his eyes too, as he realized whose jacket and sword she bore. But she offered a grim smile. Later, if they somehow survived this, if they could last another few minutes and get into the shelter, they'd speak then. Ethan nodded, understanding. Bryce knew it wasn't adrenaline alone that powered her as she launched back into the carnage. Shelters close in 4 minutes, Declan announced it to the conference room. Why hasn't your helicopter arrived? Rune asked Fury. He stood, Flynn rising with him. Axe started checking her phone. It's on its way over from... The doors at the top of the pit burst open, and Sandriel entered on a storm wind. There was no sign of her Triari or Pollux as she strode down the stairs. No one spoke. Hunt prepared himself as she glanced his way, seated between a now standing Rune and Hypaxia. The Gorison manacles lay on the table before him, but she merely returned to her seat at the lowermost table. She had bigger concerns at hand, he supposed. Her attention darting between the screens and feeds and updates. Sandriel said, There's nothing we can do for the city with the gates open to hell. We are under orders to remain here. Rune started. We are needed. We are to remain here. The words rumbled like thunder through the room. The Asteri are sending help. Hunt sagged in his seat, and Rune sank down beside him. Thank fuck, the prince muttered, rubbing shaking hands over his face. They must have dispatched the Asterian guard then, and further reinforcements. Perhaps Sandriel's Triari had gone to Lunathian. They might all be psychotic assholes, but at least they could hold their own in a fight. Fuck, the hammer alone would be a blessing to the city right now. 3 minutes until shelter lockdown, Declan said. In the general chaos of the audio feed, Declan had pulled up. A shifter's howl went out, warning everyone to get to safety, to abandon the boundary they'd established against the horde, and run like hell for the still open metal door. Humans were still fleeing, though, Adults carrying children and pets sprinted for the opening, hardly bigger than a single-car garage door. The Viper Queen's warriors and a few of the wolves remained at the intersection. 2 minutes, Declan said. Bryce and Ethan fought side by side. Where one stumbled, the other did not fail. Where one baited a demon, the other executed it. A siren blared in the city. A warning. Still, Bryce and Ethan held their corner. 30 seconds, Declan said. Go, Hunt urged. Go, Bryce. She gutted a demon, rolled toward the shelter at last, Ethan moving with her. Good, she'd get inside, and could wait it out until the Astarian guard arrived to wipe these fuckers away. Maybe they know how to seal the void in the gates. The shelter door banged closing. They're too far, Fury said quietly. They'll make it, Hunt ground out. Even as he eyed the distance between the slowly closing door and the two figures racing for it. Bryce's red hair a banner behind her. Ethan stumbled, and Bryce grabbed his hand before he could go down. A nasty gash gleaming in Ethan's side, blood soaking his t-shirt. How the mail was even running. The door was halfway closed, losing inches every second. A clawed humanoid hand from inside warped around its edges, multiple pairs. And then a young brown-haired wolf was there, her teeth gritted, her face lupine, roaring as she heaved the inevitable against the inevitable. As every one of the wolves behind her grabbed the sliding door and tried to slow it. 15 seconds, Declan whispered. Bryce ran and ran and ran. One by one, the wolves of Ethan's pack lost their grip on the door, until only that one young female was holding it back, a foot braced against the concrete wall, bellowing in defiance. Ethan and Bryce charged for the shelter, the wolves focused solely on the shelter door. Only 3 feet of space remained, not enough room for both of them. Bryce's stare shot to Ethan's face, sorrow filled her eyes, and determination. No, Hunt breathed, knowing exactly what she'd do. Bryce dropped behind just a step, just enough to draw upon her face strength to shove Ethan forward, to save Connor Holstrom's brother. Ethan twisted toward Bryce, eyes flaring with rage and despair and grief. Hand outstretched, but it was too late. The metal door shut with a boom that seemed to echo across the city. That was echoed across the city, as every shelter door shut at last. Her momentum was too great to slow. Bryce slammed into the metal door, grunting in pain. She turned in place, face leached of color, searching for options and coming up empty. Hunt just read it on her face. For the first time, Bryce had no idea what to do. Every part of Bryce shook as she took cover in the slight alcove before the shelter. The sunset a vibrant wash of orange and ruby, like the final battle cry of the world before the oncoming night. The demons had moved on, but more would be coming soon. As long as the gates held those portals to hell, they would never stop coming. Someone, Ethan probably, began pounding on the shelter door behind her, as if he'd claw his way through, open up a passage for her to get inside. She ignored the sound. The Viper Queen's warriors were flashes of metal and light far down the street, still fighting. Some had fallen, heaps of steaming armor and blood. If she could make it to her apartment, it had enchantments enough to protect her, and the others she could get inside. But it was 20 blocks away. It might as well have been 20 miles. An idea flared, and she waited, considering. She could try. She had to try. Bryce took a bracing breath. In her hand, Danica's sword shook like a reed in the wind. She could make it. Somehow, she'd find a way. She leapt into the blood-slick streets, sword held ready to attack. She didn't look back at the shelter behind her as she began to run. Blind memory of the city grid sinking in to guide her on the fastest route. A snarl rumbled from around the corner, and Bryce barely brought up her sword in time to intercept the demon. She partially severed its neck, and was running again before it fully hit the ground. She had to keep moving, had to get to the old square. Dead shifters and the Viper Queen's soldiers lay in the streets, even more dead humans around them, most in pieces. Another demon barreled from the red sky. She screamed as it knocked her back, slamming her into a car so hard the windows shattered. She had all of a second to wrench open the passenger side door and climb in before it landed again, attacked the car. Bryce scrambled over the armrests and stick shift, fumbling for the driver's side door. She yanked on the handle and half fell into the street. The demon so distracted with shredding the tires on the opposite side that it didn't see her lurch into a sprint. The old square. If she could make it to the old square. 2 demons raced for her. The only thing she could do was run, as the light began to fade. Alone. She was alone out here. The city was starting to go quiet. Every time Declan checked the audio in another district, more screams had diminished, cut off, one by one. Not from any calm or salvation, Hunt knew. The voids in the gate remained open. The sunset gave way to bruised purple skies. When true night fell, he could imagine what sort of horrors hell would send through. The kind that did not like the light, that had been bred and learned to hunt in the dark. Bryce was still out there. One mistake, one misstep, and she would be dead. There'd be no healing, no regeneration, not without the drop. She made it over the border of the old square, but she didn't run for safety. No, she seemed to be running for the heart gate, where the flow of demons had halted, as if hell were indeed waiting for true night to begin before its second round. His heart thundered as she paused down the block from the gate, as she ducked into the alcove of a nearby shelter, illuminated by the first light lamp mounted outside it. She slid to the ground, her sword loosely gripped in one hand. Hunt knew that position, the angle of the head. A soldier who had fought a good, hard battle. A soldier who was exhausted, but would take this moment, this last moment, to rally before their final stand. Hunt bared his teeth at the scream. Get up, Bryce. Rune was shaking his head, terror stark on his face. The Autumn King said nothing, did nothing as he watched his daughter on the feed Declan placed on the main screen. Bryce reached into her shirt to pull out her phone. Her hands were shaking so hard she could barely hold it, but she hit a button on the screen and lifted it to her ear. Hunt knew what that was, too. Her final chance to say goodbye to her parents, her loved ones. A faint ringing sounded in the conference room, from the table at its center. Hunt looked to Jezebel, but her phone remained dark. Rune stayed dark as well. Everyone went silent as Sandriel pulled a phone from her pocket. Hunt's phone. Sandriel glanced toward him, shock slacking in her face. Every thought eddied from Hunt's head. Give him the phone, Rune said softly. Sandriel just stared at the screen, debating. Give him the fucking phone, Rune ordered her. Sandriel, the Hunt shock, did. With trembling hands, he picked up. Bryce? On the video feed, he could see her wide eyes. Hunt? Her voice was so raw. I thought it would go to audio mail. Help is coming soon, Bryce. The stark terror on her face as she surveyed the last of the sunlight destroyed him. No, it'll be too late. It won't. I need you to get up, Bryce. Get to a safer location. Do not get any closer to that gate. She bit her lip, trembling. It's still wide open. Go to your apartment and stay there until help comes. The panic terror on her face hardened into something calm at his order. Focused. Good. Hunt, I need you to call my mom. Don't start making those kinds of goodbyes. I need you to call my mom, she said quietly. I need you to tell her that I love her, and that everything I am is because of her. Her strength and her courage and her love. And I'm sorry for all the bullshit I put her through. Stop. Tell my dad, she whispered. The Autumn King stiffened, looked back toward Hunt. Tell Randall, she clarified. That I'm proud I got to call him my father. That he was the only one that ever mattered. Hunt could have sworn something like shame fitted across the Autumn King's face, but Hunt implored. Bryce, you need to move to safer ground. Now. She did no such thing. Tell Fury I'm sorry I lied. That I would have told her the truth eventually. Across the room, the assassin had tears running down her face. Tell Juniper. Bryce's voice broke. Tell her thank you for that night on the roof. She swallowed a sob. Tell her that I know now why she stopped me from jumping. It was so I could get here, to help today. Hunt's heart cracked entirely. He hadn't known, hadn't guessed that things had ever been that bad for her. From the pure devastation on Rune's face, her brother hadn't known either. Tell Rune I forgive him, Bryce said, shaking again. Tears streamed down the prince's face. I forgave him a long time ago, Bryce said. I just didn't know how to tell him. Tell him I'm sorry I hid the truth, that I only did it because I love him, and didn't want to take anything away from him. He'll always be the better one of us. The agony on Rune's face turned to confusion. But Hunt couldn't bear it. He couldn't take another word of this. Bryce, please. Hunt. The entire world went quiet. I was waiting for you. Bryce, sweetheart, just get back to your apartment and give me an hour and... No, she whispered, closing her eyes. She put her hand on her chest, over his heart, over her heart. I was waiting for you, in here. Hunt couldn't stop his own tears then. I was waiting for you too. She smiled, even as she sobbed again. Please, Hunt begged. Please, Bryce, you have to go now, before more come through. She opened her eyes and got to her feet as True Night fell, faced the gate halfway down the block. I forgive you for the shit with the synth, for all of it. None of it matters. Not anymore. She ended the call and leaned Danica's sword against the wall of the shelter alcove. Placed her phone carefully on the ground next to it. Hunt shot from his seat. Bryce. She ran for the gate.